talk a little baseball, spring training, pitchers and catchers, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see some movement with some signings, some free agent signings as well. Steve Gardner does a great job covering baseball for USA Today. Kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on a Wednesday. Steve, how you doing, pal?
I'm good, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Appreciate it as always, and definitely look forward to another great year of having you on the air with us. Always adding some great insight and dialogue. What's the latest? What are you hearing regarding the Phils and the conversation now with Jake Arrieta? And when it's all said and done, do you think he would accept an offer of, say, 2 years, knowing that Boras is his agent?
Yeah, I kind of find it hard to believe that he would. I mean, he's still a top-flight pitcher, and, even though he is on the other side of 30, he still can command a pretty sizable deal. I would expect to see, when he finally does sign wherever it is, to be one of those like J.D. Martinez signed, with opt-outs and things like that, because they're not, teams are just not giving the years and the dollar values that we've seen in previous off seasons, and I think that's the new reality right now.
And it's funny because the Phillies met with Boras in December, but they were not going to get, I don't want to say baited in a long-term deal, and believe it or not, their patience actually paid off. They've got the money to spend, but is this a move that they signed Santana? They bring back Neshek. They've got young core players in that infield. They've got, obviously, Williams and Hoskins. They've got sluggers. They've got a little offense going. They added, like I said, to Santana. Would a move like this let the fan base know, okay, we believe that we're not only going to compete this year and play better baseball, but we can also contend for, say, a wild card spot?
I think it would, actually. I mean, they've got a guy in Aaron Nola that is probably, pretty close to being a top-of-the-rotation starter. Certainly he is on this roster. But if they had, the opportunity and were able to sign Arrieta, I think it would end up being kind of a similar move that, when the Washington Nationals were a flailing franchise and they signed Jason Worth to a deal above and beyond what I think anybody else was willing to pay. It was also not only, adding to the roster, but it was a sign that, they're ready to move forward and to take the idea of competing for a division title to the next level. And we see what's happened since then. So, I think it would be kind of a symbolic move. And, if you're looking at the Phillies roster and some of those young guys that you mentioned, the window of competing is probably coming, I would think, at least in their minds, in the next year, 2019, 2020, and to have somebody like that at the top of the rotation where, will probably still be pretty good, even at age 33, 34, and give that kind of experience, I think that would be a positive thing for a team that wants to be a player, down the road.
When you look at you mentioned the starting rotation, it's still somewhat of a mystery because you've got 5, 6, 7 guys really vying for 5 spots. I mean, other than Nola, there's still question marks.
Yeah, huge question marks. Can Vince Velasquez stay healthy for an entire season? If so, there's a lot of upside there. But what do you get out of Eichhoff and Pivetta and anybody else? Jake Thompson possibly, maybe taking a step forward. But yeah, there are a lot of question marks there. And I think like a lot of teams, they're not going to let those guys, maybe after Nola, go more than 5 innings. They're not going to let them go through the order 3 times to where, the opportunities for the opposing hitters gets greater. And it takes that, kind of a geometric jump up the 3rd time through. So that's why Neshek, Tommy Hunter, guys like that were important because they bolster the bullpen, which they're going to need this season.
Yeah, and that was a bugaboo last year. I mean, I was reading a stat yesterday that if their bullpen was at least perfect on some of the games that they led, now you're turning around, instead of winning 66 games, they're winning 82. I mean, they would have been a 500 team. They only converted about 57% of their save opportunities. And remember, early on last year, they already made a switch in the pen. So, I mean, the last thing a new skipper, a new manager wants to do, Kapler wants to do is be indecisive when it comes to their rotation. I was reading, or their bullpen, I was reading a report where they might throw 4 or 5 guys out there if need be and just is, quote, long relief to get to their closer. And I don't know if that's just Gabe and that, quote unquote, unorthodox managerial style. I don't know if it's a new thing in baseball, but I mean, it's always nice to have a guy you can rely on that can, close out 35 out of 40 games in a season instead of having to just fluctuate and see or ride the hot hand.
Yeah, and I think Neris is that guy. I mean, he's got the stuff. He's got some experience closing now. I think that will help him. But in the second half, he was very good. Neshek was very good pretty much all season long. Tommy Hunter was very good. I mean, a lot of those guys, even Ramos in the bullpen and some of those others had good second halves and improved from the first half to the second. And I think that's kind of what Gabe Kapler has to look at. I've got all of these guys. I can rotate, like you said, maybe go 7 starters deep and take guys from the minor leagues, move them to the major leagues, and kind of rotate through there. See if somebody sticks, somebody takes their game to the next level, and hope that you can do it with quality or with quantity rather than necessarily quantity. Or you get it.
Quality, yeah, quality, exactly. You want the quality over quantity. Quality. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On paper, still Washington. I mean, they're the prohibited favorite. Then you look at the other teams in the NL East, and I know people think the Mets are a mess, but I still think it boils down to their starting rotation. I mean, if these guys are healthy and at least they can revert back to the form a couple years ago when they went to the World Series, just going to be an 85-90 win team.
Yeah, I think so, and that's what they're banking on. Mickey Callaway, had presided over a pretty darn good rotation there in Cleveland. So I think that's an important thing, and really, I think the biggest thing this offseason for the Mets may not be the change in the dugout or anything like that, but changing the training staff and some of the medical techniques and things like that. I think that's huge for them because that's where a lot of their problems centered. Getting guys that were maybe not completely healthy and putting them back into the rotation or out in the field and getting them re-injured. I think that was huge for them and contributed significantly to the bad seasons the last couple of years. So that's an important thing. And if they can keep DeGrom and Syndergaard and maybe even get something out of Matt Harvey, that's huge for them. And I think some of the moves that the Mets have made in the offseason, whether it's getting Todd Frazier for a year, Jay Bruce to come back, those are good short-term moves that will make them a better team this year for sure.
What's your thoughts on the Atlanta Braves? Second half of the season, they played much better competitive baseball. I know they made some moves as well, trading off some players. But, I mean, is this, I'm not going to write them in as a wild card team, but, I mean, is there an improvement in your eyes over last year?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a team that can be very exciting, maybe the second half of this year and possibly a contender next year. So many good young players there. And it all starts with Freddie Freeman. Mm-hmm. But building around him, Ronald Acuna is a guy we're going to hear an awful lot about. He's the number 1 prospect in all of baseball, jumped from single A all the way to triple A last season and is poised to be a starter, for the majority of the year, if not start, from day one. So you've got him. You've got Ozzie Albies, another guy there that is only 21 years old. He's going to be a potential star. And this is a team that really is up and coming, and a lot of good players coming up through the farm system. This is definitely a team to watch. I think, in another year or two, the NL East could be back to one of those power divisions as the Phillies get better, the Braves get better, and they end up all beating up on the Marlins.
Any shot that the Braves get into the Moustakas sweepstakes here? I mean, I'm reading a lot of people think right away it's going to be the Chicago White Sox, but it doesn't seem like the Royals have any interest in bringing them back. So.
Yeah, it's an odd market this year because there aren't many teams that can really use a third baseman for the long haul. I think, the Yankees have been mentioned as a team, mm-hmm. but they have their eye on Manny Machado next year when he becomes a free agent. So I think it may be a 1-year contract for Moustakas and play for the big one next year. As for the Braves, possibly. I mean, but I don't know. They've got a young guy whose name escapes me, a prospect. Austin Riley, I think is his name, coming up through the minor league. So he could be ready. at the end of this year and next year, so they don't really need to sign somebody long-term there. The Cardinals, I've heard, as a possibility for Moustakas, and actually I think he's probably the best, or they're the best fit for him right now, because the Cardinals are looking to contend now and can use somebody to give them some stability at third base. So, yeah, he's going to be maybe the most interesting and the guy who maybe lasts the longest out of all of these free agents, because he certainly deserves a multi-year contract from what he did last year, but the fits are just not great right now.
Let me go back to the Phillies for a second. And again, Steve Gardner from USA Today joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on a Wednesday. We'll take you up to 2. How about Greg Holland? I mean, here's a guy that was an all-star last year. Maybe people are looking at, buyer beware. He had the 41 saves against Colorado, which is kind of tough to do. I'd have to look at his splits at home, but nonetheless, that's a pretty solid season. He's an all-star, and yet, is it possible maybe he missed a boat? He missed his opportunity to kind of cash in at a big money deal, because a lot of the relievers signed early in free agency, and he kind of waited and waited. And the reason I bring it up, if the Phillies are not sold on their pen and their closer, why not then at least, okay, you got a 32-year-old in Holland, maybe again you can make it an appealing kind of deal, or is this buyer beware, second half of the season, his ERA was horrible and he was terrible?
Yeah, I think that's what's caused a lot of teams to shy away from him. Plus the thing, with so many more analytically minded general managers, the idea of paying full price for a quote-unquote closer, a proven closer, when you see guys all the time coming up from the setup ranks or converted starters who can handle the role as closer. And so the role itself is not that great. You do not need necessarily a proven closer in that role. So I think, again, St. Louis is probably a team that would look at Holland because of that. But as for the Phillies, sure, it could make your bullpen a lot deeper. And as we were talking before, the more guys that you have and the more options you have in the bullpen, the less of a stress you put on your starting rotation. So I think it could be definitely a nice spot for Holland if the Phillies decide to get involved, because he could have a heck of a year and possibly, drive his value up. And another thing, too, could possibly be traded during the course of the season if the Phillies aren't, close to 500 or anything like that, aren't competing for a possible playoff berth or anything at midseason, and Holland has proven himself. Maybe there's a team, that is in need of a reliever or a closer at the trade deadline that could use him.
All right, let me let you out on this one. So, MLB, the experiment now with shortening the mound visits, and I guess they reverted back to a couple games in the World Series, which I said, first of all, that's the allure and appeal of baseball. Baseball is meant to be played slow, and those were epic games. Now, I went and I timed out. I actually calculated all 7 games yesterday on the air because I had a couple minutes to kill. But in any event, it came out to an average of 3 hours and 21 minutes. Now, that's World Series. So I guess my question to you is it really going to make that much of a difference? Is it really going to speed up the game, or as many have suggested, I know Josh said this the other day, you want to attract younger crowds and younger generations and younger audience. Is another 20, 30 minutes really going to do that, or shortening up the trips to the mound?
I think the perception of baseball dragging along is what Major League Baseball is trying to address here. I mean, Gary Sanchez, if we were watching during any part of the playoffs last year, would go to the mound so frequently during the playoffs especially that it got to be I'm watching a Yankees game and Sanchez is going to go out there and talk every other pitch. I think that's what baseball is trying to address. It's almost the perception. The thing that'll take the most time off the complete total time of game is cutting the commercial breaks by 20 to 30 seconds for every game.
Now, come on. That's never going to happen.
Well, that's what they're doing. That's part of the new rules that they're putting in. It's 20 seconds more that they're cutting from regular season games, and 30 seconds in between innings during the playoffs and nationally televised games. I think that's going to show some results on the stat sheet. When we look at time of game, I think we're going to see it go down because of that. But it's doing nothing to impact the pace of play. I think the umpires have the ability to tell the pitchers or tell the hitters, get on the mound or get in the box. And I think that would improve pace of play much more than some of the other things, limiting mound visits or cutting time off of the commercial break.
Interesting theory. I got about 30 seconds. I was thinking about this. When you watch the NFL games on Fox, they were doing something new when they would brand that, or I want to say lead into that break, hey, we'll take a quick time out and hear from our friends at Taco Bell or whatever. You're still on game action, even though it's a break, and they would have the split screen. I don't remember if baseball did that last year. So the viewer's not flipping.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
I know NASCAR has done that too, and I think that helps you feel connected to where it's not that interminable commercial break where I wonder when they're ever going to come back.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, something to chew on. All right, my friend, always great stuff. I think you just took a shot at the Yankees just to take a shot at the Yankees.
Wouldn't be a
first.
Talk to you if I didn't get,
exactly. Hey,
to do that, right?
Don't worry about it. We'll see how your O's do this year. All right, listen, we will talk next week. We'll kind of do the over and unders, have a little fun with that. Always appreciate it, pal.
All right, sounds good, Rich.
All right, you got it, Steve. Have a great week. Steve Gardner does a great job. USA Today.